So I made the choice. I would go to the heart of the warrior's stronghold. I would speak to them myself. My teachings would likely be rejected, I knew that, but I would leave planted among them the images and concepts, and would soften and modify their pending invasion. I would attempt to give them some conception of the overall global picture, to remind them of their own integrity and why they were banished, and of the kingdom to come. My challenge was to be in their world, but not of it, for I knew too much technically to be in their world at all. I knew that it existed only in their imaginations, a creation entirely of their fears. So I did the only thing I could to truly reach them. I took my spirit and caused it to forget, that I might incarnate among them and grow up as a child in their culture, allowing my incarnate awareness to be tailored to their fiction, molded into a communication device that would speak their language. I taught them when I awoke of the power of the living God, that it was ever available, that it was a power to which they could surrender all fear, a power that would infuse them, awaken them, and make them whole. I showed them it was not an abstract, mystical, or etheric power, but a practical, biological reality living within them, the power called life. I taught them that the life within and around them contained profound intelligence and design. I showed them how to contact this intelligence and how to allow life's designs, the kingdom of heaven, to emerge from within their own hearts. I taught them of the spirit beings, the angels, who have been wielding the creative power of life on earth for 3.5 billion years. I explained to them how blending with the Holy Spirit of these beings would transform and revolutionize their lives, but that they themselves had to invite spirit into their affairs, for without invitation, the bird tribes would not interfere with their freedom of will. In my life, my teachings, and my example, I made the point that human beings do not have to be controlled by their fears, that they could relax and surrender all their fears to the fire that burns eternally in the sacred heart of God, that they could align themselves with eternal love, become one with the Creator, and live their lives in peace and harmony with each other and with a benevolent universe. There was something I cared about more than anything in the world. I longed to see the human beings incarnate in the warrior societies, forgiving one another, loving one another, and looking at things through the eyes of their spirits, instead of exclusively remaining locked into the perceptions of their egos. I longed for them to come into an awareness of the magnificence around them, of their potential and forgotten joy. I called upon the highest good, and because I was aligned with the Creator's intentions when my statement was cut short, my prayer triggered a response from both heaven and earth. My call broke through to the highest levels of the spirit world. Others saw the potential that I had perceived, and, because it was a matter close to the heart of the Great Spirit, a context for healing the most violent of the warrior tribes was in that moment conceived. Any time a statement is cut short in the earth walk of one incarnate, and there is a longing to complete that statement, as there was in my case, it represents a bubble, a potential culture, like a yogurt culture or a yeast culture. This one happened to become a new sort of human culture, complete with the manifestation of every positive as well as every negative potentiality. Christian civilization, something that invited each one to complete the life the crucifixion interrupted, something that flew in the face of all odds, something that took the fear-centered darkness of the Judeo-Roman world order and split it down the middle. There is an underside and an overside to what the unconscious centuries of Christian civilizations have done. I know that well, for I and other spirits of my light circle have monitored each of these centuries. Our historical behind-the-scenes presence has been obscured from human vision because historical people have no vision. They turn their perception over to others. They refuse to give credibility to any experience not easily put into words. They believe that if their native language does not have terms for it, if people do not speak of it, it must not exist. In effect, they let others do their seeing for them. They give away their power. They become unwitting prisoners of a popular, language-centered fiction. They do not often notice even a single angel, much less an entire species of spiritual guardians, though we are ever present behind the stage props of their preoccupations. People pay in more attention to what other people tell them than to their own perception is the beginning of civilization. It is the beginning of a twisting, warping influence that ultimately produces a shift in human orientation from the internal guidance of the Great Spirit to external dominance by others. Civilization does not occur among healthy people. In healthy non-historical societies, people are not overly concerned with other people's fantasies. They are certainly not manipulated through externally imposed descriptions of reality. In America, civilization was a step backward. However, for the warrior tribes, civilization was a step in the right direction. The domestication of animals and the growing of grains necessitated the development of values other than the values of the predatory hunt or annual raid on the neighboring village. So to the warrior races we taught certain arts. The civilizations we initiated in Japan, India, China, and elsewhere provided us with educational context in which we could introduce values that warrior societies would never develop outside such contexts. Since their tightly woven linguistic preconceptions made it virtually impossible for us to communicate directly with the individual members of the warrior societies, we did the next best thing. We communicated slowly but sure through guiding the long-term development of their collective values. We had been working with this slow but relatively certain form of angelic human communication for many long millennia before we sensed the time to introduce the more specific teachings that could only come from one of us who had actually incarnated among them. The ideas introduced at the beginning of the Christian era, though initially rejected, nevertheless lingered on in Western consciousness. Like ivy working gently but firmly on stone walls, they have gradually taken hold and upset many of the traditional assumptions of the warrior state. By intensifying every creative as well as every destructive human influence, these ideas were directly responsible for the highly stressed social context that gave birth to the Industrial Revolution. Although it has wreaked havoc with Earth ecologies, the Industrial Revolution has been both valuable and necessary. When humankind is healed and we are able to work freely through our species, there is no ecological damage that will not, even before a few centuries, be entirely undone. It is easier to flush toxins from the Earth's river valleys than to remove the toxic ideas that cause them from human minds. In the order of healing, it is human consciousness that must first change. The most significant effect of the industrial era is that it has birthed the information age, and has brought us into communication with your race on a scale far beyond what otherwise would have emerged. The Industrial Revolution drew the inherent contradictions of the fearful state into high visibility. At a time when the intelligence level among human beings has risen to unprecedented heights, almost to the very threshold of awakening, global telecommunication systems now keep human attention focused upon the problems that result from fear-centered ways of thinking. It will keep your attention focused on these problems until you solve them through the only act that can, a total departure from the entire warrior paradigm, the departure from the old ways history has begun. Many are now aware of us. Our consciousness flows daily through the word processors of 1,000 creative thinkers. Our insights and perspectives are bubbling beneath the surface of dozens of new movies, hundreds of new books, and thousands of news articles and popular songs each year. Humanity is linked in a single socio-economic community that now closely monitors all new and potentially relevant information.